They didn't top sales charts, they didn't scream for attention, but these 1980s motorcycles looked ordinary until they didn't. Hidden horsepower, experimental tech, and performance that punched way above their class. These are the rare machines that slipped through the cracks. And now, they're almost impossible to find. Starting off with Kawasaki GP's 750 Turbo. It looked like any other Kawasaki sport bike, until you twisted the throttle. The Kawasaki GP's 750 Turbo didn't just flirt with power, it forced it down your throat. Introduced in an era obsessed with turbocharging, this bike was Kawasaki's bold declaration that the future had arrived early. On paper, it packed a 738cc inline-4 engine, but hidden beneath that standard-issue styling was a factory-installed turbocharger capable of delivering 112 horsepower, an eye-widening number in the early 1980s. It wasn't just fast for its class, it was one of the fastest motorcycles you could buy, pushing to a top speed of 136 miles per hour. But what made it a true sleeper wasn't just the numbers, it was the disguise. It looked nearly identical to its non-turbo siblings, which meant riders who underestimated it got left in the dust. That subtlety gave it an underground reputation, an assassin in a three-piece suit. Still, for all its innovation, the GP's 750 Turbo was almost too ahead of its time. Turbo lag was real, the system was complicated, and riders weren't ready for a learning curve that aggressive. And while the engine could roar, the price tag made buyers hesitate. As simpler, naturally aspirated sport bikes caught fire in the market, the GPZ quietly slipped away. Kawasaki ended production after just a couple of years, but its legacy never died. Today, the GP's 750 Turbo is a unicorn, rare, underrated, and brutally quick when properly tuned. It was never meant for the mainstream. It was built for the few who saw past the quiet exterior and knew what it really was. But while Kawasaki was sneaking turbochargers into street bikes, Yamaha was doing something even crazier, bringing Grand Prix race technology straight to the hands of everyday riders. Let's look at number 2, the Yamaha RZ500. It sounded like a swarm of angry bees and hit like a missile. The Yamaha RZ500 was a street-legal race bike in disguise, and unlike anything else on the road when it dropped in 1984. Inspired directly by Yamaha's championship-winning GP bikes, the RZ500 housed a 499cc two-stroke V4 engine. Not just one of the rarest configurations in motorcycle history, but one that came with twin crankshafts and a power output of 88 horsepower. On a bike this light, that translated into explosive speed. The top speed was around 140 miles per hour, and it felt like it. But this wasn't just about raw numbers. The RZ500 was designed with agility and precision in mind. Its lightweight frame, quick revving motor, and razor-sharp response gave skilled riders the sensation of piloting a true Grand Prix machine because, in many ways, they were. And that's exactly what made it rare. The US market barely saw it due to strict emissions laws that choked out two-stroke engines. In countries where it was legal, few riders were brave, or skilled, enough to fully unlock its potential. Maintenance wasn't simple either. Tuning a V4 two-stroke wasn't a job for casual Sunday riders. But for those who knew what they had, the RZ500 was a weapon with a racing soul and street tags. Today, it's become one of the most sought-after collectibles of the two-stroke era, a cult legend for those who wanted their adrenaline delivered fast and loud. Because while most motorcycles just take you places, this one made you feel like you were chasing a checkered flag. They built the RZ500 for the racetrack, but over in Germany, BMW was imagining something radically different, a futuristic sport tour that looked like it came from another planet. Number 3, BMW K1. It looked like it had been teleported from the future, and in a way, it had. The BMW K1 was nothing short of a design shockwave when it debuted in the late 1980s. Gone were the boxy lines and conservative silhouettes BMW was known for. In their place, bold, aerodynamic bodywork, electric blue and fire red paint, and a riding posture that said, "This isn't your father's touring bike." At its heart was a 987cc inline-4 engine, producing 100 horsepower at 8,000 revolutions per minute, enough to push the machine to 140 miles per hour, a serious number for a bike that also came with a warranty and luggage. But the real innovation wasn't just speed. BMW loaded the K1 with features that felt more like aerospace engineering than motorcycle design. Anti-lock brakes, paralever rear suspension, and enclosed body panels made it one of the most advanced motorcycles of its time. It was built not just to ride, but to redefine what a sport touring bike could be. And yet, it failed. Why? Price, weight, and shock. Riders didn't know what to make of its futuristic look. Some loved it, others laughed at it. Its high cost and nearly 600-pound curb weight made it a tough sell for both performance fanatics and long-distance riders. Add to that a narrow focus on high-speed stability rather than nimble agility, and the market simply wasn't ready. But time has been kind to the K1. What was once mocked is now admired for its daring ambition. Today, the BMW K1 is a cult classic, remembered as the bike that dared to think 10 years ahead and got punished for it. And while BMW was pushing the limits of futuristic design, Ducati took a different risk with a machine that divided opinion but quietly changed Ducati's future. Number 4, Ducati Passo 750. It was sleek, strange, and shaped like nothing else on the road. The Ducati Passo 750 wasn't just another sport bike. It was a revolution in a red cloak. Named after Italian racer Renzo Pasolini, the Passo was Ducati's bold attempt to merge performance and elegance into one uninterrupted silhouette. Every mechanical detail, engine, suspension, even the frame, was wrapped in a fully enclosed aerodynamic shell, a radical departure from the exposed trellis designs the brand was known for. Beneath that smooth skin was a 748cc L-twin engine, pumping out 72 horsepower at 7,800 revolutions per minute and hitting a top speed of 130 miles per hour. On paper, the numbers were respectable. In practice, the experience was polarizing. That was mostly due to one component, the Weber carburetor. It was notoriously finicky, a single carb trying to feed 2 cylinders, and it made throttle response inconsistent unless perfectly tuned. But that's not the whole story. What the Passo lacked in mechanical refinement, it made up for in design influence. This was one of the first Ducatis to aim squarely at the Japanese sport bike market, offering both style and wind protection in one dramatic package. And though the engine setup was later refined and replaced, the Passo laid the groundwork for Ducati's future supersport lineup. It didn't sell in huge numbers, it didn't win races, but the Passo wasn't trying to fit in. It was trying to redefine what an Italian sport bike could be in the age of wind tunnels and full fairings. Today, the Ducati Passo 750 is a rare collectible, a misunderstood misfire that turned out to be a stepping stone. Because sometimes, the bike that bends the rules doesn't win the race. But it does rewrite the next chapter. Ducati tried to wrap performance in sleek, enclosed styling. Suzuki went the other way with a design no one saw coming. Moving on to number 5, Suzuki GSX 1100S Katana. In the early 1980s, one motorcycle didn't just challenge design norms, it shattered them. The Suzuki GSX 1100S Katana wasn't built to blend in, it was built to make jaws drop. From the moment it debuted, its sharp-edged aggressive styling looked like something out of a cyberpunk future. This was no accident. Suzuki hired German designer Hans Muth, famous for the BMW R90S, to create a motorcycle that would stop people in their tracks, and he delivered. The Katana's chiseled fairing, flat tank, and sunken seat were a direct assault on traditional motorcycle aesthetics. But this wasn't just a fashion statement. Underneath that radical skin was a 1,074cc air-cooled inline-4, producing 111 horsepower, enough to launch it to a top speed of around 140 miles per hour. It came with a twin-shock rear suspension, dual front discs, and a stance that gave it muscle bike presence. In a straight line, it was brutally fast. In the corners, it was surprisingly planted for its time, so why didn't it sell? The Katana's styling was divisive. Riders used to rounded tanks and chrome weren't ready for something that looked like a spaceship. Add to that a price tag slightly higher than its more conservative rivals, and many buyers hesitated. It didn't help that Suzuki released it into a market still getting used to the idea of motorcycles being both art and weapon. But time changed everything. Today, the GSX 1100S Katana is a cult icon. Collectors fight over clean examples. Custom builders pay homage to it, and even Suzuki themselves revive the name in modern form, proof that the Katana left a scar on motorcycle history. It was one of the first bikes to show the world that design could be just as dangerous as speed, and for those brave enough to ride it back then, they didn't just own a bike, they made a statement. But while Suzuki was making bikes that looked fast, Yamaha was taking a different route with a machine that redefined how engines should be built. Number 6. Yamaha FZ 750. Sometimes, revolution hides in the cylinder head. The The Yamaha FZ 750 didn't just enter the sport bike scene, it quietly reinvented it. At its core was the groundbreaking Genesis engine, a 749cc liquid-cooled inline-4 with a twist, 5 valves per cylinder. That was 20 valves in total, something unheard of in production motorcycles at the time. This unique configuration allowed the FZ 750 to breathe better, rev higher, and generate 105 horsepower at 10,500 revolutions per minute. Combine that with a top speed of 140 miles per hour, and you had a machine that could hunt leader bikes on the street and track. But performance was only half the story. The FZ 750's engine was canted forward at a 45-degree angle, lowering the bike's center of gravity and improving airflow through the carbs. That tilt also gave the chassis designers room to move the fuel tank lower, improving balance. Paired with a steel perimeter frame and refined suspension, the FZ 750 handled with a smoothness that made it feel surgically precise, especially for a mid-1980s bike. And yet, despite all this innovation, it never became the superstar Yamaha hoped for. Why? Timing. Just a few years after the FZ 750's debut, Yamaha dropped the FZR series, with even sharper styling, lighter frames, and more aggressive marketing. The FZ suddenly looked old school in a world obsessed with the next thing. Riders who wanted the latest spec skipped right past it. But the FZ 750 was never about hype. It was about fundamentals. Today, it's remembered not just as a stepping stone, but as a trailblazer. It proved that engineering brilliance didn't need flash to change the game, and for those lucky enough to ride one, it was like being let in on a secret. The bike with the best ideas isn't always the loudest in the showroom, because real innovation doesn't need to scream. Sometimes, it just passes you at full throttle and disappears. While Yamaha was chasing performance through high-revving innovation, Honda was chasing endurance with Number 7. Honda XL-Fi 750R. It didn't roar, it rumbled, like something engineered to outlast everything around it. The Honda XL5 750R wasn't designed to impress crowds at a cafe. It was designed to conquer long distances and brutal terrain without asking for permission. At a glance, it looked like a typical 80s dual sport, tall, wide, rugged. But underneath the utilitarian shell was one of Honda's most ambitious engineering experiments of the decade. It came equipped with a 749cc air/oil-cooled V-twin engine producing approximately 61 horsepower at 7,000 revolutions per minute. Nothing groundbreaking until you look deeper. Honda packed this bike with features designed to eliminate rider hassle. A shaft drive replaced chains, hydraulic valve tappets killed the need for constant adjustment, and its dry sump lubrication system stored oil in the frame, freeing up space and improving cooling. Every component screamed one word: durability. But it wasn't lightweight. At 220 kilograms, 484 pounds wet, the XL-V 750R was no nimble dirt bike. Off-road enthusiasts found it too bulky for aggressive trail riding, and on the street, it lacked the sleek flash of its sportier siblings. Caught between two categories, the XL-V struggled to find a devoted audience. Most buyers passed it over for simpler trail bikes or more luxurious tours. And yet, that's exactly why it's a sleeper. This bike was quietly decades ahead of its time, a true hybrid that offered reliability, comfort, and rugged design in one V-twin package. Today, it's nearly impossible to find a clean example, especially outside Europe and Australia, where it had its strongest but limited presence. Collectors now see what most riders didn't. The XL-Fi 750R was never trying to win races, it was trying to survive them. And for those who recognized its genius, it became more than a motorcycle. It became a machine that would just keep going, even when you wouldn't. While Honda was building longevity into every bolt, Italy had something else in mind, a machine that didn't just perform, but performed with unmistakable flair. Let's talk about number 8, Moto Guzzi Le Mans 1000. It had curves, it growled, and it carried a name with legacy built in. The Moto Guzzi Le Mans 1000 wasn't just an evolution, it was a continuation of one of the most respected sport touring bloodlines in European motorcycling. Building on the original Le Mans series, this 1980s icon featured a 949cc air-cooled V-twin engine that produced 81 horsepower at 7,800 revolutions per minute. That power pushed it to a top speed of approximately 135 miles per hour. Impressive, but not its defining trait. What made the Le Mans 1000 special was how it delivered everything with old-school charm and European precision. The half-fairing design gave it a sport bike silhouette without hiding the beautiful mechanical muscle underneath. A comfortable, upright position and generous fuel capacity meant you could ride all day, not just between cafes. And the rumbling V-twin? It gave every twist of the throttle a sense of occasion. Yet, in the wider market, it got overshadowed. Japanese manufacturers were flooding the streets with faster, lighter, flashier machines. Riders, seduced by high-revving inline fours and plastic-clad rockets, often skipped right past Moto Guzzi's subtler offering. It wasn't the fastest, and it wasn't the cheapest, but it had something the others didn't: soul. Over time, that soul has turned the Le Mans 1000 into a quiet legend. It didn't chase trends, it preserved tradition, and in doing so, it won the hearts of riders who cared more about feel than lap times. Today, it's appreciated as one of the last great expressions of Guzzi's commitment to character over conformity. Clean examples are rare. Enthusiasts hold on to them like heirlooms, and when one passes you on the road, it doesn't scream. It sings. The Le Mans 1000 wasn't built to compete. It was built to remind you why you fell in love with motorcycles in the first place. Moto Guzzi preserved its heritage with twin-cylinder elegance, but Honda went big, 6 cylinders, screaming revs, and one of the boldest engineering moves of the decade. Let's talk about number 9, Honda CBX 1000. It didn't sound like a motorcycle, it sounded like a Formula One car on 2 wheels. The Honda CBX 1000 was never about subtlety. Released in 1978, it was Honda flexing every muscle it had, and that flex came in the form of a 1047cc air-cooled inline-6 engine producing 105 horsepower at 9,000 revolutions per minute. At a time when most bikes had 2 or 4 cylinders, Honda dropped 6 into a single frame, and it changed everything. But this wasn't just a novelty. That 6-cylinder setup wasn't just wide, it was silky smooth, delivering linear torque and an exhaust note that left jaws on the pavement. It could sprint with the best of them, pushing around 62.7 pound-feet of torque at 8,000 revolutions per minute and weighing in at approximately 600 pounds wet. Yet somehow, it handled better than it had any right to. The CBX also came with dual front discs, a 5-speed manual gearbox, and a 6.3-gallon fuel tank, which meant it was just as capable of touring as it was terrorizing backroads. And when you twisted that throttle, the sound alone felt like it could split atoms. So why did it fade? By the early 80s, buyers were gravitating toward more practical sport touring machines, like Honda's own CB900F. The CBX was heavier, more expensive, and frankly, more intimidating to maintain. With its complex engine architecture, it was overbuilt for the average rider and underappreciated in its own time. But now, it's the holy grail of vintage Honda performance. The CBX 1000 is a living legend, a piece of engineering art that screamed in the face of restraint and dared riders to keep up. You didn't just own one, you worshipped it. And if you ever hear one ripping through the gears today, you'll know exactly what you're listening to, because no other bike sounds like a CBX. While Honda was making a statement with 6 cylinders and high-revving excess, Suzuki went a different kind of wild by strapping a turbo onto a mid-weight. But was the world ready? That brings us to number 10, the Suzuki XN85. Suzuki didn't need to shout. Instead, it let the turbo spool do the talking. Launched in 1983, the Suzuki XN85 was a short-lived but ambitious leap into the turbocharged trend sweeping through early 80s motorcycling. At its core was a 673cc inline-4 boosted by an IHI turbocharger and tuned to produce 85 horsepower. That might not sound outrageous today, but back then, it meant serious punch in a compact frame. What really made it a sleeper wasn't just the boost, it was the subtlety. The XN85 looked like a restrained sport tourer, but twist the throttle past mid-range, and it surged forward with a kick few riders expected. Its top speed was around 130 miles per hour. But it wasn't just about straight-line speed. This was also one of the first production motorcycles to come equipped with a 16-inch front wheel, enhancing responsiveness in corners. Add in rear set pegs, low clip-ons, and a stiff chassis, and the XN85 handled far better than most turbo bikes of its era, making it one of the rare few that could carve corners as well as it could blast highways. Still, Suzuki wasn't in it for the long haul. Only 1,153 units were produced, making it one of the rarest production bikes they ever built. It was too technical, too specialized, and, frankly, too ahead of its time, but today it's a collector's dream. A factory turbo bike with understated style and just enough muscle to humble bigger machines. And while the XN85 quietly proved what turbo power could do, Suzuki was already working on something louder that would redefine the sport bike category for decades to come. Number 11. Suzuki GSX-R 750. It didn't just change Suzuki, it changed the entire industry. The Suzuki GSX-R 750, launched in 1985, wasn't a response to the competition. It was a warning shot. Suzuki took lessons from its racing program and turned them into a production machine that blurred the line between track weapon and street bike. At its core was a 749.7cc air/oil-cooled inline-4 engine, delivering approximately 100 horsepower at 10,500 revolutions per minute. But the real genius wasn't just under the tank. It was all around it. This bike introduced the world to the concept of a true race replica. The lightweight aluminum box section frame, the minimalist fairings, and even the suspension setup were designed with one thing in mind: performance without compromise. It weighed just 419 pounds wet, a figure that stunned riders and humbled rivals. On the road, it was agile. On the track, it was a predator. The GSX-R 750 brought race bike geometry, weight savings, and power-to-weight balance into a world where most street bikes still felt bloated and slow. It wasn't just faster, it felt faster. Every twitch of the throttle reminded you that you were riding something bred for the podium. But here's the sleeper twist. The original GSX-R 750 didn't get the love it deserved right away. In a world obsessed with leader bikes and inline-4 dragsters, the 750 was seen as an in-between class, neither the torque of a 1000cc nor the affordability of a 600cc. For years, it flew under the radar. Now, it's recognized as the bike that started it all. Early models are now rare collector's items, hunted by enthusiasts who understand that this was the beginning of the modern sport bike era. The GSX-R 750 rewrote the rulebook. It didn't ask permission, it just showed up and won. Because sometimes, evolution doesn't crawl forward. It hits a red line and never looks back. But while Suzuki was building the future with pure racing DNA, Kawasaki was going off script, strapping a turbocharger to a middleweight and creating a time bomb on wheels. The final motorcycle on this list, number 12, Kawasaki GP's 750 Turbo. It looked like a regular sport bike, until it didn't. The Kawasaki GP's 750 Turbo wasn't here to play fair, it was here to break the rules. Released at the height of the 1980s turbo craze, Kawasaki took its 738cc inline-4 platform and gave it a twist, literally. With the help of a factory turbocharger, this mild-looking machine churned out 112 horsepower at 8,500 revolutions per minute and 73.1 pound-feet of torque at 6,500 revolutions per minute, giving it acceleration that could slap leader bikes of the era. This wasn't some aftermarket bolt-on job either. Kawasaki engineered this thing with surgical intent. The turbo system was integrated with modified fuel delivery, reinforced engine internals, and custom exhaust routing. Top speed, a blistering 140 plus miles per hour. And weighing around 530 pounds wet, it wasn't light, but it felt like a rocket when the boost kicked in. And therein lay the thrill. Below 5,000 revolutions per minute, the GP's 750 Turbo was calm, even docile. But once that needle climbed, it exploded. The turbo lag was real, but so was the payoff. Riders who learned to control the surge found themselves addicted to it. Those who didn't, they learned fast. Despite its performance, it never caught on. Why? Because the public wasn't ready. Turbocharging required patience, finesse, and mechanical understanding, not exactly mass-market qualities. Add in its high price and limited production, and Kawasaki quietly pulled the plug after just a couple of years. But today, the GP's 750 Turbo is a cult phenomenon. It's one of the rarest production turbocharged bikes ever made, and a symbol of what happens when a company ignores convention and builds for sheer insanity. The GPZ 750 Turbo didn't just go fast, it came out of nowhere and made everyone pay attention. Because in the 1980s, there was fast, and then there was turbo. These bikes didn't just slip through the cracks, they lived there, built to perform, forgotten by the market, and now nearly impossible to find. Which one surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and if you're into motorcycles that defy the spotlight, hit like and subscribe. There's more where this came from.